Let me make sure everything is recording properly. Yes, we are live. Good. Today I want to talk about something that should terrify every single person watching this video. But most of you have probably never heard the full story. You might have seen a headline or two a few years ago. Maybe you remember something about journalists being hacked, or some spyware controversy that came and went in the news cycle. But what I am going to walk you through today is not just a scandal. It is not just a privacy violation. What I am going to show you is the single most sophisticated intelligence operation in modern history. An operation so successful that it fundamentally changed the balance of power on this planet, and almost nobody understands how or why it happened. The operation is called Pegasus, and if you think this is just about phone hacking, you are missing the entire picture. Pegasus is the reason governments fell. It is the reason elections were stolen. It is the reason journalists were murdered. It is the reason dissidents disappeared. And most importantly, it is the reason one small country with a population smaller than New York City now has more geopolitical leverage than nations 10 times its size. That country is Israel. And the company behind Pegasus, NSO Group, did not just build a piece of software. They built a weapon, and they sold that weapon to anyone willing to pay, with one critical condition. Every single piece of intelligence gathered by Pegasus flows back to Israeli intelligence. Every conversation, every text message, every password, every secret. So today, I am not just going to tell you what Pegasus is. I am going to show you how it works, who used it, what they did with it, and most importantly, why the Pegasus story reveals a truth about modern power that almost no one is willing to say out loud. The age of traditional military dominance is over. The age of intelligence dominance has begun. And Israel is not just participating in that age, Israel is defining it. Let me start with a simple question. How do you conquer the world without firing a single shot? That is not a rhetorical question. It is a strategic problem that intelligence agencies have been trying to solve for decades. In the 20th century, empires were built on military strength. You needed tanks, aircraft carriers, nuclear weapons, and millions of soldiers. But in the 21st century, something changed. The most valuable asset on the planet is no longer oil or gold or land. It is information. Whoever controls information controls everything. They know what their enemies are planning before their enemies even finalize the plan. They know which politicians are corrupt. They know which generals are disloyal. They know which journalists are digging into stories that need to be buried. And if you have that kind of knowledge, you do not need an army. You just need leverage. This is where Pegasus comes in. But to understand Pegasus, you first need to understand the company that created it. NSO Group was founded in 2010 by 3 former members of Unit 8200. If you do not know what Unit 8200 is, let me explain. Unit 8200 is the Israeli military's elite intelligence division. It is the equivalent of the NSA in the United States, but smaller, more agile, and according to many experts, significantly more effective. Unit 8200 recruits the smartest hackers, mathematicians, and engineers in Israel, often straight out of high school. These are 18-year-olds who can break into the most secure networks on the planet. They serve their mandatory military service, they learn skills that no university in the world can teach, and then they leave the military and start private companies. And this is the brilliant part. These companies are private. They are not officially part of the Israeli government. They can sell to anyone. They can operate in countries where Israeli intelligence cannot officially go, but every single one of these companies maintains deep ties to Israeli intelligence. It is a perfect system. You get all the benefits of state-level espionage with none of the official accountability. So in 2010, Niv Karmi, Shalev Julio, and Omri Lavi, all former Unit 8200 operators, founded NSO Group. Their mission was simple: build the most powerful surveillance tool in human history, something that could hack any phone anywhere in the world without the target ever knowing. And they succeeded. By 2016, NSO Group had developed Pegasus, and it was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Let me explain how it works, because this is where it gets truly frightening. Most people think that if you are careful with your phone, if you do not click on suspicious links, if you use strong passwords, you are safe. That was true 10 years ago. It is not true anymore. Pegasus is what is called a zero-click exploit. That means it does not require you to do anything. You do not have to click a link, you do not have to download an attachment, you do not even have to answer a call. Pegasus can infect your phone through a missed WhatsApp call. It can infect your phone through an iMessage that you never even see because it deletes itself after installation. One day your phone is fine. The next day, someone on the other side of the world has access to everything. Your camera, your microphone, your messages, your emails, your location, your photos, your passwords, everything, and you will never know. Now let me be very clear about what this means in practice. Imagine you are a journalist investigating corruption in your government. You are being careful. You use encrypted apps. You meet your sources in person. You do not trust anyone, but your phone has been infected with Pegasus. That means the people you are investigating can read every message you send before you even hit send. They can listen to every conversation you have, even when your phone is sitting on your desk and you think it is off. They can see every document you photograph. They can track everyone you meet with. They know your sources before you even publish the story. And here is the key point. They can act preemptively. They can arrest your sources before you go public. They can fabricate evidence against you. They can discredit you. They can kill you and make it look like an accident, all because they had access to your phone. This is not a hypothetical. This actually happened, and it happened dozens of times. One of the most famous cases is Jamal Khashoggi. Khashoggi was a Saudi journalist who wrote for the Washington Post. He was critical of the Saudi government, particularly Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. In 2018, Khashoggi walked into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to pick up some paperwork. He never walked out. Saudi agents murdered him inside the consulate, dismembered his body, and disposed of the remains. It was one of the most brazen political assassinations in modern history. And for a long time, people asked, how did the Saudis know exactly where Khashoggi would be? How did they know his schedule? How did they know who he was talking to? The answer is Pegasus. According to investigations by Citizen Lab, a research group at the University of Toronto, people close to Khashoggi, including his wife, were targeted with Pegasus in the months before his murder. Saudi intelligence used Pegasus to monitor Khashoggi's communications, track his movements, and identify everyone in his network. They knew exactly when he would be vulnerable, and when the moment came, they acted. Now, NSO Group denies that their software was used in the Khashoggi killing. They say their product is only sold to governments for legitimate law enforcement and counterterrorism purposes. But that is a lie. And we know it is a lie because we have seen the client list. In 2021, a massive leak revealed that Pegasus had been sold to at least 45 countries. These were not just Western democracies using it to fight terrorism. The client list included Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, Rwanda, Hungary, India, Mexico, and Azerbaijan. These are authoritarian regimes. These are countries with documented human rights abuses. And they were all using Pegasus to spy on journalists, activists, lawyers, opposition politicians, and human rights defenders. The leaked data contained over 50,000 phone numbers that were selected as targets. 50,000. Among them were nearly 200 journalists from organizations like the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, the Financial Times, Al Jazeera, and Reuters. There were human rights activists from Amnesty International. There were lawyers defending political prisoners. There were elected officials from opposition parties. There were even heads of state. The president of France, Emmanuel Macron, was on the list. The prime minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, was on the list. 14 heads of state in total were targeted. Think about what this means. It means that governments around the world were using Israeli technology to spy on their own citizens, on foreign leaders, on journalists trying to hold power accountable. It means that democratic norms, privacy, free press, all of these things that we are told are fundamental to modern civilization were being systematically destroyed by a single piece of software. And the company selling that software was operating with the full knowledge and protection of the Israeli government. Let me pause here and address the obvious question. How do we know the Israeli government knew about this? Because in Israel, companies like NSO Group cannot export their technology without explicit approval from the Ministry of Defense. Every sale, every client, every contract has to be approved by Israeli authorities. That means when Saudi Arabia bought Pegasus, Israel approved it. When the UAE bought Pegasus, Israel approved it. When Morocco bought Pegasus, Israel approved it. This was not some rogue company operating in the shadows. This was Israeli foreign policy by other means, and it was brilliant. Because here is what Israel gained from this arrangement. Every time a government used Pegasus, NSO Group collected the data. And that data did not just stay with the client. NSO Group had backdoor access to everything. They could see what Saudi Arabia was spying on. They could see what the UAE was targeting. They could see what Morocco was monitoring. And all of that intelligence flowed back to Unit 8200. Do you see the genius of this? Israel was not just selling a product. They were building the largest intelligence network in human history. A network that gave them visibility into the inner workings of dozens of governments, including allies and adversaries. They knew what Arab leaders were planning. They knew which European politicians were vulnerable to blackmail. They knew which American officials were having secret conversations. And all of this was legal. All of this was done through private contracts between private companies and sovereign governments. Now, let me take this one step further, because this is where the story becomes even more disturbing. In 2019, WhatsApp, which is owned by Facebook, now Meta, filed a lawsuit against NSO Group. The lawsuit alleged that NSO had exploited a vulnerability in WhatsApp to install Pegasus on the phones of 1,400 users. These were not criminals. These were journalists, human rights activists, and political dissidents. WhatsApp's lawsuit revealed something critical. NSO Group was not just selling software to governments and walking away. They were actively involved in the operations. NSO employees were helping clients identify targets. They were providing technical support for the hacking operations. In some cases, they were even conducting the hacks themselves. This means NSO Group was not a neutral technology provider. They were an active participant in espionage and repression. And here is the kicker. When the story broke, when the whole world found out that Pegasus was being used to target journalists and activists, when human rights organizations demanded accountability, what happened? Almost nothing. A few politicians made angry statements. The US government put NSO Group on a blacklist, restricting American companies from doing business with them. But NSO Group is still operating. They are still selling Pegasus. They just rebranded. They restructured. They found new clients. And the Israeli government continued to approve their exports. Because from Israel's perspective, this was not a scandal. This was strategy. Let me now shift to a different angle, because the Pegasus story is not just about surveillance. It is about power. And to understand the kind of power we are talking about, you need to understand what happened in Catalonia. In 2019, Catalonia, a region in northeastern Spain, held a referendum on independence. The Spanish government declared the referendum illegal. There were massive protests. There were violent crackdowns. And behind the scenes, there was Pegasus. According to Citizen Lab, at least 65 people connected to the Catalan independence movement were targeted with Pegasus. These included elected members of the European Parliament, Catalan President Pere Aragonès, lawmakers, activists, and their family members. Spanish intelligence used Pegasus to monitor the entire independence movement. They read private messages. They listened to strategy sessions. They identified funders and organizers. And when the time came, they arrested the leaders. Now, Spain is a democracy. Spain is a member of the European Union. Spain is supposed to have rule of law, independent courts, and freedom of speech. But none of that mattered, because when you have Pegasus, you do not need to follow the rules. You can see everything before it happens. You can neutralize threats before they materialize. You can arrest people before they commit crimes. This is pre-crime. This is the world of Minority Report, except it is real, and it is happening right now. But it gets worse. In 2021, it was revealed that the phones of several Spanish government officials, including the Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez and the Defense Minister Margarita Robles, were also hacked using Pegasus. At first, people assumed it was the Catalan separatists getting revenge. But then the truth came out. It was not the Catalans, it was Morocco. Why would Morocco hack the Spanish government? Because Spain had allowed a Moroccan opposition leader to receive medical treatment in Spain, and Morocco was furious. So Morocco used Pegasus, which they had purchased from Israel, to spy on Spanish officials. This created a massive diplomatic crisis. Spain demanded answers from Israel, but Israel said nothing, because Israel had already gotten what it wanted. They had intelligence on both Spain and Morocco. They had leverage over both sides, and they had demonstrated to the entire world that if you want to play the game of modern geopolitics, you need Israeli technology. Let me now tie all of this together, because we are approaching the core argument. The Pegasus story is not just about one company or one piece of software. It is about a fundamental shift in how power works. For most of human history, military strength determined who ruled the world. The Romans had the best legions. The British had the best navy. The Americans had the best air force and nuclear arsenal. But in the 21st century, military power is no longer enough. In fact, in many cases, it is a liability, because modern wars are not won on battlefields. They are won in the shadows. They are won with information, blackmail, sabotage, and psychological operations. And the country that controls the tools of digital espionage controls the world. Israel understood this before anyone else. Israel is a tiny country. It has 9 million people. It has no oil. It has hostile neighbors on almost every border. It cannot compete with China or Russia or the United States in terms of raw military power, but it does not need to, because Israel has something more valuable. It has Unit 8200. It has the world's best hackers. It has companies like NSO Group, Celebrite, Candiru, and Verint, all of which sell surveillance technology to governments around the world. And through these companies, Israel has built an intelligence empire. An empire that does not require territory or occupation or military bases. An empire built entirely on information. And here is the most important part. This empire is invisible. Most people do not even know it exists. When you think of Israeli power, you think of the Israeli Defense Forces. You think of the Iron Dome. You think of Mossad assassinations. You do not think of a private tech company selling spyware to the King of Morocco, but that is exactly where the power is. Because the King of Morocco now depends on Israel for his security. If he wants to monitor his opposition, he needs Pegasus. If he wants to prevent a coup, he needs Israeli intelligence, and that gives Israel leverage. The same is true for Saudi Arabia. The same is true for the UAE. The same is true for India, Mexico, Hungary, and dozens of other countries. They are all dependent on Israeli technology, and that dependency translates into political power. Let me give you a concrete example. In 2020, the United States brokered the Abraham Accords, a series of agreements normalizing relations between Israel and several Arab states, including the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan. The mainstream narrative is that these deals happened because of American diplomacy and because Arab states realized that Israel is not their real enemy. But there is another explanation. These deals happened because Arab monarchies were already deeply integrated into the Israeli intelligence ecosystem. They were already using Pegasus. They were already sharing intelligence with Israel. The Abraham Accords were not the beginning of cooperation. They were the public acknowledgement of cooperation that had been happening in secret for years. And here is why that matters. If you are an Arab leader who has been using Israeli spyware to monitor your own population, to crush dissent, to spy on rival factions within your government, you are compromised. Israel knows everything you have done. They have all the data. They know which journalists you killed. They know which elections you rigged. They know which foreign leaders you bribed. And if you ever decide to turn against Israel, they can leak that information. They can destroy you. So normalization is not a choice. It is a necessity. You normalize with Israel because you are already in bed with them, and there is no way out. Now, I want to address the inevitable question. Is this illegal? And the answer is complicated. Technically, selling surveillance technology is legal. Governments have the the right to conduct intelligence operations within their own borders, at least according to their own laws. And NSO Group always claimed that they only sold Pegasus to governments for legitimate purposes like counterterrorism and fighting organized crime. But we know that is not what happened. We know Pegasus was used to target journalists, activists, lawyers, and opposition politicians. We know it was used to commit human rights abuses. So why has no one been held accountable? The answer is sovereignty. When the government of Saudi Arabia uses Pegasus to spy on its own citizens, that is a Saudi crime, not an Israeli crime. When the government of Mexico uses Pegasus to target journalists, that is a Mexican crime, not an Israeli crime. NSO Group can always claim that they sold a tool, and what their clients did with that tool is not their responsibility. It is the same argument gun manufacturers use: we just make the product. What people do with it is not our fault. And legally, that argument has held up. NSO Group has faced lawsuits. They have faced bad publicity, but they have never faced criminal prosecution. And as long as the Israeli government continues to approve their exports, they will keep operating. But there is a deeper issue here. Even if you could hold NSO Group accountable, even if you could shut them down tomorrow, it would not matter. Because the model has already been replicated. There are now dozens of companies around the world selling similar surveillance tools. There is Cellebrite, also Israeli, which sells phone cracking technology to law enforcement. There is Candiru, another Israeli company which developed spyware similar to Pegasus. There is the Spanish company Veriston. There is the Italian company Hacking Team. There is the German company Finfisher. Every major intelligence service in the world is now investing in these capabilities. The genie is out of the bottle. The age of digital surveillance is here, and there is no going back. So what does this mean for you? What does this mean for the average person watching this video? Let me be blunt. If you are a person of political significance, if you are a journalist, if you are an activist, if you are a lawyer working on sensitive cases, if you are an opposition politician, your phone is not secure. It does not matter if you have an iPhone. It does not matter if you use encrypted messaging apps. It does not matter if you are careful. If someone with enough resources wants to hack your phone, they can. And there is almost nothing you can do about it. Apple and Google have tried to patch the vulnerabilities that Pegasus exploits, but every time they patch one vulnerability, NSO Group finds another. This is an arms race, and the attackers are winning because NSO Group has virtually unlimited resources. They employ some of the smartest hackers in the world. They have access to zero-day exploits, which are vulnerabilities that have never been discovered before and therefore have no patch. And they sell these exploits for millions of dollars to governments who use them to maintain power. Now let me take a step back and talk about the bigger picture, because this is not just about Pegasus. This is about the future of global power. We are living through a transition. The old world order, the one built on military alliances and nuclear deterrence and economic sanctions, is dying. The new world order is being built on information dominance, and the countries that control information will control everything else. China understands this. That is why they have built the Great Firewall. That is why they have TikTok, which is not just a social media app. It is a data collection tool that gives China access to the behavioral patterns of 1 billion people. Russia understands this. That is why they invest so heavily in cyber warfare and disinformation campaigns. The United States understands this. That is why the NSA spies on everyone, including its own allies. But Israel is ahead of all of them, because Israel has figured out how to weaponize the private sector. Instead of building a massive state surveillance apparatus like China, instead of relying on government agencies like the NSA, Israel has outsourced the work to private companies. And those companies sell to everyone, which means Israel gets intelligence on everyone. They get intelligence on their allies. They get intelligence on their enemies. They get intelligence on neutral countries. And because it is all done through private contracts, there is plausible deniability. If something goes wrong, if there is a scandal, the Israeli government can say, "We had nothing to do with it. That was a private company." But in reality, the government controls everything. This is the model of the future, and other countries are already copying it. The UAE has created its own cyber intelligence companies. Saudi Arabia is investing billions in cyber capabilities. Even smaller countries like Singapore and the Netherlands are developing offensive cyber tools. Everyone wants to be Israel, Because everyone has realized that in the 21st century, the country with the best hackers wins. So where does this leave us? What is the end game? I think we are moving toward a world where privacy no longer exists, at least not for anyone who matters. Politicians, journalists, activists, business leaders, academics, anyone with influence will live under constant surveillance, not just by their own governments, but by foreign governments as well. Every conversation will be monitored, every transaction will be tracked, every movement will be recorded, and all of that data will be stored, analyzed, and used to predict behavior, manipulate outcomes, and maintain control. Some people will say this is paranoid. Some people will say I am exaggerating, but I am not. Everything I have described is already happening. It is documented. It is public record. The only question is whether we are willing to see it. Because the Pegasus story was the biggest intelligence leak in modern history. It revealed that governments around the world are using military-grade spyware to target civilians, and the response was basically nothing. A few articles, a few outraged tweets, and then everyone moved on. Why? Because people do not understand the implications. They think this is a privacy issue, but it is not. It is a power issue. It is about who gets to control the future. And right now, Israel is winning that fight. Not because they have the biggest army, not because they have the most money, but because they understood before everyone else that information is the ultimate weapon. And they built an entire ecosystem to collect, analyze, and weaponize that information. NSO Group is just one company, but it is a symbol of a new kind of empire. An empire that does not need to invade countries or occupy territory. An empire that operates through smartphones and servers and software vulnerabilities. An empire that is invisible until it is too late. Let me end with this. The Pegasus story is not over. NSO Group may rebrand. They may be sold to another company. They may shut down entirely. But the technology is not going away. The demand is not going away. And the Israeli intelligence ecosystem that created Pegasus is not going away. In fact, it is expanding. New companies are being founded by former Unit 8200 members every year. New tools are being developed. New clients are being signed. And with every new sale, Israel gains more leverage, more intelligence, more power. So the next time you hear about a journalist being arrested, the next time you hear about an activist disappearing, the next time you hear about a government crackdown on dissent, ask yourself this question. How did they know? How did the authorities know exactly who to target? How did they know exactly when and where to strike? And the answer, more often than not, will be Pegasus, or something like it. Because in the modern world, the most dangerous weapon is not a bomb. It is a piece of code. And the people who control that code control the world.